Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Sabine here. It's a wonderful opportunity and a great honor and pleasure for me to be here today with my very, very adored colleague and friend. Her name is Felice Dunas, and she's a renowned scientist, and she will tell her much easier and much better about herself. But I have really become very interested in her work because we had met in a very official occasion, and she was an invited speaker in Saudi Arabia and was teaching for 3 weeks to couples in Saudi Arabia about sexuality. And that's really something that we would have a lot in common to say. And I think because these are subjects that, sexuality, femininity, relationships, this is really our bread and butter that we have every day, making our lives so much more complex and interesting and tiring. And that's why I think it's a great opportunity today with Felice to share our experiences from the Western world, from my side with the traditional Chinese Eastern world of Felice. And I'm just so glad and honored and excited to share with my community and with her community our different views. Felice, who are you? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Besides being your dear friend and colleague, I am one of the founders of the acupuncture profession in the United States. And you would say, well, why would someone engaged in acupuncture be speaking about sexuality and relationship and femininity? Well, the truth is, in Chinese medicine, which is my background, I have a PhD in clinical Chinese medicine and pharmacology. From that perspective, we link every aspect of self together. The physical self, the relational self, the emotional self, the sexual self. We treat everything sort of combined. We don't separate aspects of who we are medically. We see it all together. So in a sense, I deal with the behavioral aspects of Chinese medicine. I deal with how we approach our relationships, how we approach our sexuality, how we feel about ourselves in reference to our gender as women. How is femininity defined, and how do we define ourselves as women? These are very important issues worldwide. And my approach is to bring an ancient philosophy and ancient teachings and essentially translate it for the modern woman, and to introduce you to some of the beautiful and long-lived philosophies that, when combined with Dr. Sabine's understanding of hormones, there's just this beautiful magic in understanding ourselves that can happen. And that's what I hope we can do today.
And that is so wonderful because, the truth is that in my clinical practice that, I see so many women every day, and for so many years, I get this great sense of having lost femininity and, having had this discussion with so many women that we really, we become in the Western world, we have all these roles, we are mothers, we are lovers, we are caretakers, we are breadwinners, bread earners. I mean, and the feminine side of ourselves is really increasingly neglected, and it really gets translated into having sex because the doctor told you so, because you're ovulating, and you actually, I feel, people are losing the sense of their femininity, which is really embracing and receiving, the gift of life. And I would love to hear your views on femininity and what your experience is there, Felice. I mean, that would be really precious and priceless.
Well, so I use one of the most ancient cosmologies in all of human thinking to define femininity, and that is the concept of yin and yang. You've probably seen the symbol, the black and white symbol that represents all of life in ancient Chinese philosophy. And we know that this theory is at least 5,200 years old, at least archaeologically, we know that to be true. And in this symbol, everything is divided from a point of perfect balance to the yin and to the yang. So it's really the idea of duality or polarities. So for the yin side, you would have the feminine. For the yang side, you would have the masculine. For the yin side, you would have nighttime. For the yang side, you would have daytime. And everything in life is divided essentially between yin and yang. So if we're going to use this ancient theory, and it's really been continually used throughout the last 5,000 years, if we're going to use this theory to help us understand femininity, we would look at the yin aspect and say that yin is about receptivity. That is the primary strength that yin has. Now you would say, but we can't just receive what anyone wants to give us. We can't just take it, right? Because then we're oppressing ourselves by being overwhelmed and overloaded with the needs of others if we're always receiving. Well, there's another aspect to it, and that is within the yin aspect of the symbol, there's a little white dot. Mm-hmm. The yin aspect is the black section, and the little white dot represents yang energy being the masculine. So if we were to define this hormonally, we would say that yin is estrogens, the full range of estrogens, and yang would be testosterone. Those are the polarities. So testosterone is about creativity, it's about discernment. So in essence, a true understanding of femininity from this perspective would be a combination of receptivity with appropriate discernment, meaning we allow ourselves to receive what others offer, and yet we are discerning in what we take in and what we take on, and we set boundaries. And those two components, both the yin and the yang, are extremely important. I think what has happened historically is women have been culturally forced to take on more than is truly comfortable for them. And as a result, we've lost ourselves, as you were saying earlier. Like we lose a sense of what is it to be truly feminine? What is it to enjoy femininity? What is it to feel like a girl? And in essence, if you're able to receive, but you're able to receive with boundaries and discernment, that's sort of the first stage on which one must stand to really develop a strong sense of femininity.
Interesting. And has the, in the traditional Chinese medicine, in the TCM, they have remedies for that? I mean, they would give, certain herbs and pressure points to increase that, or is that something that is purely behavioral and, the society codes and our position as women? I mean, it's just not feminine anymore. I mean, we are...
No, we can cultivate all of this. We can cultivate our yin, our feminine. We can, so in Chinese medicine, absolutely, we do treat patients in a way that would enhance femininity. And that treatment could also get rid of headaches, for example. I mean, because we don't separate the emotional, the mental, and the physical and spiritual, by addressing any aspect of self, we're addressing all aspects of self. So in essence, if you have a four-legged table and you move one leg, all four are going to move. And that's how we work. Our energy is mental and emotional and physical and spiritual and sexual and relational. And when I address that, when I meet with clients or patients, either in consultation or in my clinic, then what I'm addressing are all aspects of self. In fact, what got me involved in exploring this aspect of Chinese medicine was the fact that I was improving marriages by using acupuncture and herbs and diet for problems that had nothing to do with marriage. But as a result of the work I was doing in other areas, all of a sudden marriages began to improve and identity began to improve. Sense of self-esteem began to improve. Sense of femininity and power began to improve. Now, that's not to say that everyone has to run to an acupuncturist in order to improve what's happening in their relationships or in reference to their self-esteem. It's very helpful and it's wonderful. And if you have the option to do that, I strongly suggest it. But what we're talking about today really is how can we as women look at who we are and approach our lives from a more feminine perspective and feel empowered by being receptive. You know, there's a line that I use when I teach, and that is that women are becoming better men than men. And unfortunately, we've become more masculine. We're more creative and we're more giving. We're always giving, we're always giving, we're always giving. But giving is the yang aspect, it's the masculine. And what we really need to pay attention to is, what are we receiving? So let me give you a simple example. If you wrote a list of everything you did for other people on a typical day, and then you wrote a list of that same day, everything you did for yourself, you would probably notice that one list is much longer than the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's the point. So how could we be feminine when we're so busy being masculine and giving? Like, we think, for example, that mothering is a feminine pursuit because we do it, right? And we're women, but it's actually calling upon very masculine aspects of our nature. We're guiding, and we're goal-oriented, and we're insistent, and we're disciplining, and we're contributing, and all of these would be considered yang aspects of life. So we really become much more masculine in the way we mother. And, you know, many women will say, well, my husband feels like my second or third or fourth child. You know, he's like an additional child. And it's because we don't allow ourselves to receive. And when we don't receive from the men in our lives, then we're more masculine, and masculine behavior is actually the root of mothering.
Very interesting. And I think it's, you know, it's also so important to create awareness and to create the space in the life of women, that it's actually, you know, okay and so important for 1 hour per day that you do something for yourself. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
I think we're so much into this whole automatisms that, you know, we are multitasking. We're so proud of that. I mean, it's the worst thing ever that happened to us, you know, that we have to do 500 things at the same time, and, you know, cook, speak on the phone, give instructions to the child, and, you know, maybe write an essay. And it's really defocusing. And to create the space to be feminine, you need space, you need time, you need, you know, calming down and being receptive. I think it's not only receiving, you need to also change your antennas to be receptive, because I think it's also for the men a difficult task in our life, the way it has become, to give, because we are so much in the strong masculine energy. And I think if you do create space for yourself, and you take a step back, and you take more time for yourself, and you fix your hormonal imbalance, which is it's a big array of your diet, of your exercises, and your whole the whole aspect of it. So it's not just giving a little herb or giving a little hormone supplement that will fix it. It's really embracing the idea of becoming feminine again. And I think it's very, very important what you say. And I think that also translates into our relationships, you know, because one is the femininity, but what does this whole state of hormonal being and you know, male, female, yin, yang, due to our relationships? Don't you feel, Felice, that this is really something that is greatly affecting the relationships?
Absolutely. So we in Chinese medicine look at how women develop gynecological problems as often being a reflection of how truly receptive they are. If you look at it from an energy perspective, your partner puts energy into you when you are sexual together. He puts his body into you, he puts his energy into you. And if you're not truly receiving him, and you actually would rather he not, and you're looking at the ceiling and you're thinking about what color you want to paint it in the spring, or your carpool schedule for the next day, or something of that nature, you're not truly receiving him. And it creates energetic congestion. That's how we would look at it. and then the cells of the body are not able to organize effectively, and tissues become warped and changed, and cysts develop, and endometriosis develops, and all kinds of gynecologic problems that are directly the result of sexual energy that is being received but not wanted, and that we reject, or there isn't a flow between us. So from my perspective, having a sense of your femininity when you're able to truly receive, and receiving fully, is a very important part of having a healthy physical body in terms of the sexual organs. And, you know, I often will ask women, when you make love with your partner, is there like an instant before you start where you're resistant, where you really don't want to? And then you get more into it, and then you open and you're okay. Well, in essence, that sense of resistance is your lack of receptivity in that moment. And you're absolutely right, Sabine, we take time. Women need time. Yin energy takes a long time. That's the nature of it. Yin is slow, and we need to allow ourselves to be seduced and to seduce ourselves into lovemaking so that we're truly able to be receptive. You know, quickies are fun occasionally, but if that's really the primary dynamic of your sex life, your body is not going to be able to be comfortable with that. And your spirit, your psyche, your sense of your womanhood won't be comfortable with that. And so in essence, being able to give yourself the time to reflect quietly, to prepare yourself to make love, to quiet things inside of you so that you can feel the loving and you can allow your femininity to come forward. You know, if a man is interested in a woman, you can see it across the room. If a woman is interested in a man, she may not even know it. You know, it takes uncovering, it takes revealing. Like, we need to be revealed. And I think that's a very important piece in how we express our femininity through our sexuality, and that when we don't do it in a healthy way, we can end up making ourselves sick.
And you know, there are all these women that they have, every time they have sex, they have urinary tract infections, or they have a stinging sensation, or they have a burning sensation. So this is really 20-30% of my day is really, you know, dealing with this kind of discomforts that are really truly disabling and very uncomfortable for the women. It's not something psychological, but you know, it's interesting, this aspect that you're mentioning, that it's really stuck energy that then damages the tissues. And that's why also, you know, the traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture comes very, very handy, because one can obviously unblock it and, you know, help for the energy to flow, but also on another side, really to create the consciousness and the awareness for women that they do not have to do that. I mean, they need to allow themselves space and time to prepare, and really wanting to want whatever they're asked for. And it's really something that I find in our culture becomes overwhelmingly more and more the case, that people are not really connected. And then, you know,
Yes.
then there are the problems in the relationship, you know, and then if you have the problem in the relationship, you end up with the problems in the sexuality. So this whole holy trinity of
Yes.
femininity, relationship, and sexuality is really like it's like you know, a tape that plays again and again. And, you know, I don't know where you can set, you know, emphasis, and you can put actually your healing, you know, aspects of it on which all parts, wherever you start, it's important, isn't it? Because sexuality is then basically the end of the line of problems, and then it becomes really difficult to fix it. And then,
Well, yes, there are many ways to approach it. And what I like to do is teach women how they can take some steps on their own without the help of other people. And a lot of my work actually focuses on the sexual healing arts practices of Chinese medicine, how to use making love to heal aspects of self. And the ancient Chinese were among the very first in human history to use sexuality as a tool and the act of sex as a tool to generate healing. And that's a great deal of my work. And my book, Passion Play, is on that topic. And I think that when we use sexual practices to heal our hearts and to heal our femininity, then we're actually allowing our men to participate with us in a very beautiful way that's very natural for them. You know, we tend to need, the nature of yin is that it moves from the earth, it moves from the heavens down to the earth. And yin moves downward toward grounding. So we always start in our heads, which is, you know, where we spend most of our time. And yin energy moves downward, and ultimately it will open the heart. And when our heart is open and we feel a connection with our partner, that's when our legs open and we want to feel the yin energy fully blossoming in a sexual way. So it's really understanding that we need our sense organs, we need our intellect to be open and to be receptive with discernment. And that allows our heart to open and feel an emotional connection. And the emotional connection is what allows us to feel the sexual connection. And if we don't give ourselves time, that natural process is much less likely to happen. So one suggestion that I give women is to take between 3 and 7 minutes, because many of us don't have an hour, but you can't really deny 3 minutes. You can get to the carpool lane at school 3 minutes early. You can sit in the bathroom for a few extra minutes. You can do something to find 3 to 7 minutes. And take that time to close your eyes and allow yourself to feel completely exhausted just for those few minutes. And when you allow the fatigue to come to the surface, then it can dissipate. Now, if you're really tired and you do this a couple of times a day, you'll notice you have more vitality. Even just a few minutes of really feeling the exhaustion will allow your inner vitality to come forward, and that will then allow you to connect with your femininity and connect with your partner or yourself in a way that's healthier. We can't eliminate the physical body and everything that goes on with the physical body in terms of understanding how we behave in our relationships and in our sexual lives.
And do you see also any relation to where the women are in their cycle? Is there some, does that get addressed in the TCM, method of looking at things, or that has not really anything to do with the cycle in traditional Chinese medicine?
No, absolutely. So we have many different holes in the body. We have a bunch here, and we have some here, and we have some here, and then we have some down there, and they all do different things. Mm-hmm. And the vagina is a hole in which energy is supposed to come into it, as in sexually, our partners come into us. Mm-hmm. And it's also a hole through which energy leaves us, as in our menstrual cycle leaves us. Mm-hmm. And it's very important from the Chinese medical point of view that you abstain from putting energy into the vagina during the menstrual period, because that's when the vagina is allowing energy to leave. So if you pull energy into the vagina sexually at the same time as you're eliminating energy during your period, we would say that that creates energetic congestion. And, it's this issue of understanding that our physical bodies really do have a very strong effect on how we experience our femininity and our sexuality, and how we show up as women in our relationships, not only with our men, but with our children and our friends. I think it's this linking together that's so important. And, when we talk about hormones and our bodies biochemically participating in this process, then we really have a merging of East and West that's very beautiful, and it's very powerful.
Very, very powerful. I mean, and you see so many women in despair, when they notice that their sexual desire or their sexual, their sexual activity is declining in certain phases of their life, and they almost feel like they're, failing their marriage, failing, you know, their husbands and their partners. And, you know, this is something that can be so easily hormonologically explained, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think, again, there, it's also, you know, giving space to that sense of you know, of that sense of feeling that you cannot, you're not really forcing yourself to do it because you should, or because you're married, or because you're with your partner. And, you know, the hormones, in my experience and in my opinion, after so many years of working with women, is really like the oil in the engine that makes the engine run much more smooth. And you know, if there's an imbalance, and if there's an imbalance on the hormonal level, it's very, very difficult to manage everything else. But of course, it's the whole, you know, the whole aspect of everything, and not just, you know, popping in a pill and then hoping that things you know, will work. So it's the holistic approach to balancing this whole thing. And I'm very grateful for this conversation today, because I think, you know, if one looks into different aspects of you know, views in medicine, and, you know, TCM is one of the oldest, you know, forms of medicine in this world, and, you know, should be highly respected and not just, you know, disregarded because pharmaceutical pharmacies industries have more money. So it's been very, very big insight to see what your views are. And I think we should really sum it up from all aspects as trying to allow space, listening to our bodies, creating space and energy for us that is good for us, and not just performing because we have to perform. It's really, you know, it's an embracing of being, isn't it?
Yes, and in my book and in my lectures and in all of the work that I do, my emphasis really is on understanding that you cannot separate who you are mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And that philosophy comes from Chinese medicine, but you don't have to necessarily approach this from a medical perspective. You can work with your sexuality, you can work with self-respect, you can work with allowing yourself 3 to 7 minutes or an hour, if you have it, to be more receptive. You can recognize that you need more time to drop into being sexual, to allow your feminine self to sort of surface again, because it tends to be hidden. You know, men have outies and we have innies, and in terms of our genitals. And in some respects, that's how we relate to our sexuality. We are hidden. Our femininity needs to be brought out. And that's something I think that everyone taking a look at this can put a little attention to, just for a few minutes a day. And amazingly, you'll start perceiving things differently.
Wonderful, Felice. Thank you so much for having this talk. It was really wonderful. Once again, very refreshing and informative. You're a wonderful practitioner and colleague, and I appreciate for you taking the time. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.